Harriet Fletcher had steadily worked the loom in her workshop for nearly 30 years. Seated by a large window that overlooked Rowan Ridge's quaint main street, she would press the shuttle, shift the warp, and let her mind drift into the world she wove. Tourists and local patrons admired her tapestries for their meticulous craftsmanship, each thread forming subtle patterns and shapes that always seemed to carry an air of intrigue. Over the last few months, however, town residents had begun to sense something different in Harriet's recent pieces. Although still beautiful and skillfully made, the woven work depicted eerily specific events, some of which echoed real, long-forgotten distresses that had once shaken Rowan Ridge. It was Mabel Kinsey, owner of the local bakery, who first noticed. "She's weaving shapes that look like the old library," Mabel exclaimed to her junior baker. She had recognized the silhouette of the library's tall spire, and strangely a figure sneaking out from a side door. Years ago, the library had suffered a baffling break-in. Rare books went missing, though the crime remained unsolved. Mabel's heart quickened as she examined the tapestry Harriet had hung by her shop's window for sale. In the soft pinkish gold threads, the library's facade stood out, lit by moonlight, and to the side strode a half-shuttered figure. The significance was unnerving. Mabel decided the moment couldn't pass without further inquiry and slipped out the door, leaving her assistant in charge. Mabel walked up the lane to Harriet's workshop. A sign reading "Fletcher's Fabrics and Fine Threads" swayed gently overhead. Through the open doorway, warm afternoon light gilded the wooden countertops covered in various spools of yarn. Rolls of finished cloth, tapestries and half-finished pieces rested in organized piles across the room. Harriet paused at the loom, her gentle brown eyes swiveling in recognition at Mabel's entrance. She wore a simple linen smock, smeared with flecks of dyes and stray threads, and her salt and pepper hair was pinned into a neat bun. Everything about Harriet exuded an aura of calm and patience. "Hello there," Harriet said, her smooth voice carrying a friendly timbre. "Came to have a look at the new tapestry, I expect?" Mabel glanced at the partially woven scene on the loom. Dark browns and rust-coloured oranges swirled into a depiction that was not immediately clear. "Yes," Mabel responded cautiously. "Harriet, it's just, well, I couldn't help noticing the tapestry of the library like an entire scene that seems familiar." She stopped, unsure how to phrase her concern. Harriet's hands stilled on the threads. She pressed her lips together in a polite, almost secretive smile. "The library break-in, you mean?" Harriet asked quietly. Mabel's eyes went wide. Harriet seemed to anticipate her question. Breathing in deeply, Harriet remarked, "You're not the first to notice. I suppose my mind wanders into the past while I weave. My mind's eye conjures up images, painful happenings or sometimes joyful turning points. But often I'm drawn to lingering mysteries." She hesitated. "I assure you, I only wish for resolution and healing. It's not about causing more strife." Mabel flushed, feeling suddenly awkward. "Of course, Harriet, I didn't mean to pry. It's just that old mystery still unsettles me, and seeing it on a tapestry, it's so concrete." Harriet nodded slowly. "It's true I have no proof beyond rumor and recollection, but I like to think my tapestries hold clues." Word of Harriet's unusual depiction spread. Soon neighbors lingered at her workshop, browsing the colorful works in search of hidden memories or references. Some found them. One tapestry depicted a silhouette of a sobbing woman by a well-known creek. Speculation erupted that this was Amy Covington, who had vanished decades ago. Her disappearance remained a hushed legend in Rowan Ridge. Another tapestry, with swaths of deep purple entwined with bright yellow, evoked the fiery controversy around stolen campaign funds for a local official 6 years prior. Harriet neither confirmed nor denied these interpretations, but invited curious townspeople to look and ponder. Sometimes Harriet's visitors left her workshop with a renewed sense of determination to solve old puzzles. When Isaac Murray, the town's retired postman, glimpsed a tapestry resembling the unexplainable break-in of a well-to-do merchant's barn, he recalled a piece of evidence previously overlooked: a small scrap of cloth found near the barn door, matching a scarf Harriet had unknowingly woven into the piece. Isaac went to the local constabulary, telling them about his observations. While no new conclusions emerged right away, the remark hovered in the air, prompting fresh discussion among the townsfolk. Though Harriet handled the sudden attention with poised humility, she was privately exhausted by the ceaseless questioning. She continued weaving, adopting one quiet resolution after another about which crimes to portray and how to incorporate new clues. Late one evening, Harriet remained at the loom well after the shops on Main Street had closed. The cool night air seeped in through the cracked window, ruffling the spools of thread. Harriet took a sip of her favorite herbal tea, letting her mind drift to the flickering lamplight and the hush of the deserted road outside. She reached for a skein of burgundy yarn, recalling the day she had found it, tucked away in a chest in the attic. Burgundy was a color that reminded her of turning leaves and hidden truths, things that changed with time, things that lay unseen until the seasons shifted. Slowly, she threaded the strands into the loom. A pattern emerged, the graceful curve of the town's historic water fountain, and, on its edge, the faint outline of a ring. Harriet frowned, her memory triggered by the rumor from years ago of a stolen ring belonging to Phoebe Langford, the previous owner of the Rowan Ridge Inn. Phoebe had insisted someone took her priceless family ring, but the item was never found. Some believed she had misplaced it. Others whispered Phoebe invented the entire tale to collect insurance money. The scandal had died down, overshadowed by more pressing events. Harriet was just a child then, but she remembered how the older townspeople had gossiped. Now her fingers moved methodically, weaving the ring's silhouette, along with swirling lines that suggested water from the fountain. Her heart pounded with an odd sense of direction, as if each wooden press of the loom hammered the idea deeper into reality. The next morning, Harriet displayed the half-finished tapestry on a wooden frame within her workshop. The slender ring near the fountain was subtle, nearly camouflaged among the layers of thread. Still, sharp-eyed Margaret Hollis, the local newspaper reporter, spotted it in a heartbeat. Margaret's freckled face sparked with excitement. "Is that Phoebe's missing ring?" she exclaimed. Harriet turned, unsure how best to respond. Margaret moved closer, studying the pattern. "You know, my grandmother once told me Phoebe suspected a close friend of taking it, kept it hush-hush because she had no proof." Harriet inclined her head in polite interest. "Do you recall the friend's name?" Margaret shrugged. "Not really, but if you keep weaving, maybe more details will come through." Again, Harriet felt a flash of discomfort at how her work was now the center of speculation, but a small, persistent flame of hope flickered inside her. Perhaps, through her weaving, she could illuminate the truth. The tapestry sat on display for about a week, prompting daily visits to Harriet's workshop from folks curious about the ring. Some claimed they recognized the swirl of color as an old mark on the fountain's rim. Others suggested that Harriet's design contained a hidden letter near the ring's image, though Harriet herself couldn't quite see it. Quietly observing from the sidelines was Louise McAdams, Rowan Ridge's newly appointed librarian, who was well known for her meticulous research on the town's local heritage. Louise had always admired Harriet's artistry. Feeling drawn by the tapestry's unspoken invitation, she arrived at Harriet's door one chilly afternoon. "I'd like to speak with you, Harriet," she said with gentle urgency. "I've been hearing so many stories about your pieces referencing these old mysteries. I want to help if I can. Maybe we can solve some of them and bring closure." Harriet tilted her head. "And how might we accomplish that?" Louise's face lit up. "I've got the entire local newspaper archive at the library, plus letters, diaries, receipts, documents that have never been restored or properly catalogued. With my resources, maybe we can corroborate any hidden clues in your tapestries. A flicker of relief crossed Harriet's features. She had been exhausted juggling the curiosity of townspeople. Now, with Louise's scholarly approach, Harriet sensed an opportunity for genuine resolution. "All right," Harriet replied. "I'd be grateful for your help. There are so many half-remembered things swirling in my mind. Each tapestry seems to emerge from some intangible recollection." That evening, Harriet carefully packaged 2 of the newly woven tapestries, one depicting the library break-in and the other featuring the missing ring near the fountain. She met Louise at the library, stacking silently among the shelves stacked with dusty tomes. In the smaller back room, Louise had cleared a table, setting out various old newspapers and file folders. A single desk lamp threw golden light across the tabletop. They hung Harriet's tapestries on an improvised display stand, and Louise studied them intently. "Let's start with the ring." Louise tapped the portion of the tapestry outlining the fountain. "This may be easiest to research. We know it belongs to Phoebe, and we know the approximate date of its disappearance." She rummaged in her stack of records until she found a reference to an article from decades ago, "Family Heirloom Missing." The article was short, riddled with speculation. Harriet's gaze brushed over the words. "Phoebe Langford's ring lost or stolen. Ms. Langford offers reward for return." Louise flipped through more clippings and paused at a letter in the library's reference collection, a letter from a disgruntled friend of Phoebe's, one Millicent Cartwright. She mentions she's insulted. Phoebe suspects her and that she would never commit such a vile act. Louise squinted. "Here, see? Millicent writes that she last saw Phoebe's ring after a late-night gathering by the fountain. She recalled Phoebe removing the ring to wash her hands in the fountain's water basin. Then it was gone. Phoebe accused Millicent in anger, but the ring was nowhere to be found." Harriet bit her lip. "The tapestry shows the ring near the edge of the fountain. Could it have fallen in? The swirling lines might suggest water currents. Perhaps the ring sank below." Louise's eyes sparkled. "You think it's still somewhere around the fountain?" During closing hours, armed with flashlights and a surge of determination, Louise and Harriet ventured to the old stone structure in the center of Rowan Ridge's small park. The fountain's basin was filled with leaves and water tinted green by algae. Harriet's tapestry had shown the ring's outline near the water's surface. After rolling up their sleeves, the 2 started a careful search, hearts pounding with a mixture of hope and doubt. Minutes turned into an hour, water sloshing as they sifted through debris. Finally, Louise let out a short gasp. She held up a glimmering silver band, topped with a small emerald. Although tarnished by time, it was unmistakably a ring with an ornate design. They stared at it, breathless, as the fountain water dripped from the metal. Harriet's gaze flicked between the ring in Louise's hand and the faint pattern woven into the tapestry. The parallels were uncanny. Louise whispered, "Doesn't look like it was stolen at all, does it? Just a tragic misunderstanding." The next morning, word spread quickly throughout town. Phoebe Langford's ring had been discovered after all these years. Harriet and Louise, uncertain whether to make a formal announcement, found themselves cornered by eager townsfolk. A swirl of faces bombarded them, each voice clamoring for the story of the tapestry that turned rumor into reality. Phoebe had passed away some years back, but her nephew Henry was located out of town. He arrived that weekend to collect his aunt's treasured heirloom, brought to tears by the news that after all this time, her name was finally vindicated. A lingering tension in Rowan Ridge dissolved. Encouraged by this success, Harriet and Louise turned their attention to the library break-in tapestry. Harriet's weaving detailed a figure creeping out a side door under moonlit clouds. The library fence, a distinctive wrought iron design shaped like twisting ivy, appeared as well. Louise dove into the archives, gathering all articles from that era. The library had special sections referencing the burglary, rumors about stolen rare books, and even interviews with a mysterious traveler who passed through town at the time. As Harriet and Louise painstakingly cross-checked the tapestry's details, they noticed something curious. Harriet had unintentionally woven a small sign near the figure's path, a stylized letter M. Louise wondered if it could represent a name or business from long ago. Searching the records, they found mention of a traveling book dealer known only as Martin the Collector, rumored to have passed through Rowan Ridge around the same time as the burglary. Though never confirmed, townspeople had whispered he dealt in rare manuscripts of dubious provenance. An older resident, Isaac Murray, the retired postman, recalled delivering a package that night. He told them, "I remember a box posted out before dawn from the old shipping office. My mind's not what it used to be, but I think it was addressed to an M. Something about antique volumes." Harriet and Louise exchanged glances. There was a good chance that Martin the Collector was the culprit, mailing away the stolen books under the cover of night. Of course, proving it decades later was tricky. There was no sign of the missing books. The shipping office where the package had been posted was long defunct. Yet Harriet suspected something else was hidden in her tapestry. Each swirl of cloud in the weave looked suspiciously like cursive script. She, too, took out a magnifying glass and carefully studied the pattern. The lines seemed to form partial letters, perhaps a name or address. It was just as intangible as a half-remembered dream. Harriet sighed. If only I'd realized these clues sooner. At the library, Louise discovered a second letter from the Time, filed away under unrelated business correspondence. It was from someone named Morgan Delacroix, the caretaker of a manor in a larger city up the river. Morgan had written to the Rowan Ridge postmaster, complaining about a missing shipment of valuable books he expected to arrive from an unnamed seller. The letter read, "In case they arrive, be aware that they likely are centuries-old volumes including a bucolic primer rumored to be from the personal collection of a late cardinal. If such a package ends up in Rowan Ridge, contact me immediately." Louise and Harriet realized these stolen books had vanished in transit, never reaching Morgan Delacroix, or returning to Rowan Ridge. Martin the Collector, if he were indeed the culprit, seemed to have made off with them permanently. Whether he sold them elsewhere or kept them hidden, they'd likely never be found. Luckily, the tapestry's hidden shapes and the old records helped confirm at least the method of the theft. Rowan Ridge had closure. The thief was not local, and no further speculation tarnished any community member's name. News of Harriet's woven warnings and Louise's research soared beyond Rowan Ridge. A few out-of-town visitors showed up, intrigued by the possibility that Harriet's tapestries foretold or revealed truths. Some saw Harriet's ability as clairvoyance, though Harriet herself remained convinced it was nothing more than a rummaging through recollection, heightened by a watchful eye for detail. Still, Harriet realized how important her role was becoming in the community. People found new hope, comfort and closure through what she wove into her artwork. Despite the growing attention, Harriet stayed grounded. She wove in the early morning when the sun streamed through her workspace, and she wove late into the night with only the gentle hum of a single lamp. Sometimes glimpses of new mysteries danced before her eyes. The shape of a battered old trunk in a dusty attic, black footprints near the schoolhouse, an unlit lantern by someone's barn. She couldn't help but ponder these images, uncertain which belonged to genuine, unsolved cases, and which might simply be fragments of her imagination. One evening, Harriet prepared to close her shop when she heard a timid knock on the door. Peering outside, she saw Mary Adams, the shy seamstress who often purchased Harriet's cloth to embellish dresses. Mary stepped inside, her voice trembling. I think you've worked on something of mine," she said, gripping a small scrap of Harriet's cloth. "I recognized your signature rose pattern in the corner. You see, years ago I found this cloth near my mother's house. After—" Mary paused, swallowing hard. "After the night we discovered a break-in. Nothing was stolen, but we always wondered who it was. The detail on this cloth looked like your designs." Harriet set down the tapestry she was rolling. "I've sold so many pieces of cloth and specialty textiles over the years," she responded gently. "It might have been from my loom. But I don't recall." Mary was trembling visibly now, tears welling in her eyes. "They said it was probably just a vagrant looking for shelter, but my mother never recovered from the fright that night. She passed away with the question still in her mind. Why our house? What did they want?" Harriet opened her mouth to speak, but Mary continued. "I was wondering, if you come across anything in your weaving, any pattern or shape that might shed light on that night, would you let me know?" In that final request, Harriet felt the full weight of the role she had unintentionally assumed in Rowan Ridge. She squeezed Mary's hand. "Yes, I promise." Mary smiled faintly, exhaling relief, before she slipped out into the dark. Harriet locked the door behind her and stood in the quiet. The loom, silent and imposing, beckoned across the room. Over the next several days, Harriet found herself waking in the small hours of the morning with fleeting images of Mary's house. She remembered its bright white shutters, the meticulously kept garden, the front door that squeaked. One early dawn, Harriet placed a spool of dusky lavender thread on the loom. She followed the pattern her mind's eye offered, a silhouette of Mary's porch, a scattering of footprints. Unsure of what more to weave, Harriet allowed her hands to move automatically. Swathes of grey and brown threads converged, forming what looked like a distinct mark, an emblem Harriet had never consciously seen. She froze. Something about the shape gave her chills, as if it resonated with a memory stored deep in her mind. Moments later, someone knocked again at her door. Harriet had forgotten to lock it. She rose to find Louise standing there, hair disheveled and eyes bright with excitement. "I found something new in the archives," Louise announced, stepping inside the workshop. "There was an incident years ago that happened close to Mary's mother's house, a robbery at the shop next door. The culprit was never caught, but the shop owner described a peculiar emblem on the thief's gloves." Louise opened a folder to reveal a hand-drawn symbol, a small circle overlapping a triangular shape with diagonal lines. Harriet shivered. It echoed exactly what she'd just woven. Coupled with the memory of Mary's rummaged home, Harriet realized this thief might have used the neighboring house as a hiding place or vantage point. If Harriet's tapestry was correct, it pointed to the same mysterious figure who had worn gloves embroidered with that distinctive mark. Louise took a closer look at Harriet's partial weave and gasped. "Yes, Harriet, this is it!" The same strange motif was there in her threads, stirring fresh urgency. Armed with this revelation, they visited the local constabulary, bringing the partial tapestry and the archived papers. Though the burglary had been decades earlier, the emblem offered a forgotten clue. The old sheriff was gone, replaced by a younger officer with a commitment to reviewing cold cases. He vowed to look for any record of criminals or travelers known to use that emblem in the past. Weeks passed with no new leads. Then, unexpectedly, an out-of-county detective arrived, responding to a bulletin. He recognized the symbol as belonging to a small disbanded group of thieves who once operated along a string of railroad towns. They would mark their belongings with that emblem after every heist. Because they were active across multiple counties, local law enforcement had never fully pieced their crimes together. By piecing Harriet's tapestry imagery with the detective's knowledge, they confirmed the break-in at Mary's mother's home had likely been an accidental infiltration, while the thieves targeted the neighboring shop. Sifting through old records, they identified the group's ringleader, one Crispin Moore, who was eventually captured for a separate heist but never confessed to these smaller break-ins. With that knowledge, Mary finally had a name and explanation for the intruder. Harriet and Louise shared the news with Mary, who wept with relief. "Mom never did get answers, but at least now I know," she said softly. The haunted look that had shadowed her features for so long finally began to lift. As for Harriet, the resolution strengthened her sense of purpose. Rowan Ridge, with its gentle ambience and historic charm, had always been a cozy, unassuming place. Who would have thought that a tapestry weaver's craft might help unravel secrets lying dormant for decades? Harriet still believed her weaving was no magical prophecy. It was, in her opinion, simply the product of keen observation, a deep empathy for people's unvoiced sorrows, and a nearly photographic memory that she had never intentionally cultivated. Thread by thread, she pieced together fragments of hidden truths, leaving it to others to interpret and investigate. In the months that followed, Harriet's workshop bustled with visitors, some wanting only a colourful quilt or a fine tapestry, others drawn by half-remembered mysteries of their own. Harriet developed a more organised approach, keeping notes on each tapestry that depicted a particular incident. She collaborated closely with Louise, who cross-referenced each new piece against the archives. Though many leads ended inconclusively, a steady trickle of revelations emerged. Old feuds softened, long-held suspicions were put to rest, and false accusations found resolution. More than once, townspeople left Harriet's workshop in tears of gratitude or relief. But Harriet never stopped weaving for the joy of it, too. She continued crafting bright, whimsical pieces celebrating Rowan Ridge's festivals or its gorgeous seasonal changes. The loom still brought her peace, and it was important, she felt, that in the midst of hidden truths and unburied scandals, there remained beauty that reminded everyone of the goodness in the world. Louise would sometimes joke that Harriet should open a detective agency inside her workshop. Harriet would laugh, telling her friend that she much preferred the feel of silk and cotton to the unraveling of crimes. Yet secretly, Harriet embraced the role the community now entrusted to her. The tapestry near her loom, still half-finished, showed faint outlines of other lesser-known puzzle pieces from Rowan Ridge's past. Perhaps, with due time, each thread would add another layer to the continuing tapestry of life in the small town. On the night Harriet finally completed that tapestry, Rowan Ridge's main street glowed under lantern light. A soft hush lay over the silent buildings. Harriet stepped outside, letting the cool breeze brush her cheek. She reflected on all that had transpired since townsfolk first noticed her tapestry depicting the library break-in. From the missing ring in the fountain to the confusion at Mary's home, Harriet's intricate designs had guided them toward closure, understanding, and sometimes forgiveness. Moonlight shimmered on the glass window of her workshop, revealing the reflections of half a dozen tapestries inside, each a unique story, some solved, others still waiting. Harriet smiled, heart brimming with a comfort she could hardly describe. Tomorrow she would roll out fresh material on the loom, picking out threads of scarlet, midnight blue, and perhaps a spring green. Who knew what hidden patterns might surface next? One thing was certain. Rowan Ridge now believed in the quiet power of a weaver's craft and in the delicate lines of tapestry that spoke when words were lost. And Harriet, with gentle resolve, would continue weaving until every last thread of the town's hidden history was gently, patiently revealed.